Alrighty, Shabbat Shalom again.
Shabbat Shalom.
Wow, what a day already. Whew. We've been back in the States here for, I think, around 10 days or so, and well, it's been an experience so far. We've been through bad weather, and our electricity and water was out for 4 or 5 days. Then we were driving to New Jersey, and I don't know if you heard that the bad accident that happened here. We were right there at that accident with the school bus where the child died. We were, oh, it was terrible. It was really, really terrible. And then that shooting that happened last week, where another shooting, and just yesterday another shooting happened in Indiana, and then we come here and they're doing a fire drill. So sometimes I feel like when I'm in the US, it's a perpetual fire drill over here. Everything seems to be a fire drill that's going on. But today, I want to talk about something more exciting. I have a message I want to give today called Israel, the Fig Tree and Prophecy. Because I always say, it's important to come to Israel. You know, if you're a Muslim, according to your religion, you must go to Mecca once in your life and make a pilgrimage. Probably one of the only things I agree with in Islam. I don't agree with too much things with Islam, but I think that's a great thing. I think that if you are part of a religion, that you should know what that religion is about, because all religion, it doesn't matter what religion you belong to, all of it is part of culture, and the culture that belongs to that. And I always say that if you were going to be a Catholic, you know, you would want to go to Rome, right, and learn about Catholicism. If you wanted to be a Muslim, you go to Mecca and you want to learn about Islam. And if you want to be a true believer, you got to come to Israel. You've got to come to Israel, because you'll learn the Bible in a way that you would never learn it anywhere else in the world. And we've been blessed to host the feast there now for about 18 years, I believe. This is our 18th year hosting the feast in Israel. And I say, really, when you think about it, it's like the whole world is the facade, and Israel is kind of what keeps your mind. There was a movie many years ago, I'm trying to remember what it was, called The Truman Show. Anyone remember that movie? Where the man is living in a TV set, on a TV thing, and I don't remember the whole movie. I just remember how his life was really a facade. And a lot of times that's the way the world is today. We're living in a world that's never been like this before. You know, in 6,000 years of human history, only in the last 100 years do we have all the technology and the things, which is also part of the prophecy in Daniel 12. People will be running to and fro, and knowledge will be increased, good knowledge and bad knowledge. But I want to talk about a prophecy that I think certainly the world takes for granted. I hope we don't take for granted. And that's Israel being a nation again, right? If you think about it, you cannot name in the history of human beings one nation ever in the history of man that was gone for several thousand years and resurrected again. Think about it. Where are the Hittites? Where are the Jebusites? Where are the Perizzites? And all these different groups, where are they? They're in history books. You read about them, right? But they're not there today. And to think of the miracle that a nation could, for 2,500 years, cease to exist. They were not in their land. They were in diaspora. They were all over the world. And after 2,520 years, not only would they come back to their homeland and thrive in just one generation, but even to resurrect the very language of Hebrew. Because Hebrew was only resurrected since Israel's been back in the land in 1948. Jews always used Hebrew in the synagogues around the world, but Jews did not speak Hebrew. And that's why it's very interesting, when Israel became a nation in 1948, they were almost going to be called Judea instead of Israel. And in the last, by about a vote, they were Israel. And even the national language was not going to be Hebrew to begin with. Some people fought against it. But that was resurrected. And even when we look in modern Zionism, going back to the late 1800s, right around 1900, Theodor Herzl, who in 1897 has the first Congressional Zionist Congress. And when they start this idea of Israelites and Jews coming back to the land of Israel at that time, you know, it's a foreign idea, not everybody agreed with it. And if you look in the early movement, most of the Jews that came back to the land in the early 1900s, they were between 18 and 25. It was when the kibbutz movement started, the communal living. Their families actually disowned them. their Jewish parents, they wanted nothing to do with them because what are you going back to that land for? Israel was #1 in the world for the size of the land per square mile, you could say, for malaria, and it was not a very happy land to be. When Mark Twain went there in the late 1800s, right, he went on pilgrimage, and he writes, this is the promised land? You got to be kidding. Today, if you go to Israel, we take our groups there when we do our school to a place called Kinneret Park, and it's where the kibbutz movement started. And what's interesting there is they have a picture from, I think it's 1907. And what's interesting about that picture is when you look in the whole Sea of Galilee, there's only one tree. One tree. Can you imagine? Today, Israel has planted something like 300 million trees since 1948. There's even a day there they have where it's a tree planting day. Sometimes people will send money, $1 or $2 to plant a tree in Israel. But it is really an amazing story. And I want to show you today that it's not just an amazing story, it is literally part of prophecy of Israel to be a nation again. Because I've seen everything in the 20 years that we've lived in Israel of people saying that the Jews today are Khazars and demons and all this evil stuff, and they're not really Jews, which is nonsense, because I'm not going to go into it today, but I could go into a message after message, hour after hour, showing you miracles that happened in every war in Israel, angelic intervention, where angels literally came on tanks that were glowing with swords in their hands, protecting the nation of Israel. So I'm not here to defend Israel's sins. We're going to talk about some of those sins today, and those sins are actually going to bring their downfall. But I am here to dogmatically say that the people that are there in Israel are Jews. There's no doubt about it. You have Ashkenazi Jews that come from Europe. You have Sephardic Jews that come from the Spanish areas. And what's important to us, if you understand, I have my book over there, The Chosen People. Everything that's there, please take whatever you want. Nothing is for sale. We don't sell anything. If you want to put in a donation in the box, feel free. If you don't, that's fine. But please, take whatever you would like. It's for you. But in the Chosen People book, I show that most believers today are also Israelites, and they don't understand it. So it's important to us because by Judah being back at that land, it shows us our time is coming. And I would have thought by now, after being in Israel for 20 years, I would have thought it would have happened already. In 2007, 2008, the government of Israel approached me. They said they liked what I was doing. They wanted to start working with me. And I talked with them and asked them, do you think that maybe there could be some land allotted to people like us who believe we're Israelites? And they said, yeah, there's a possibility of it. Here we are in 2018. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm still working with the government. I was just at a meeting back in March where there was 100 world leaders, presidents, ambassadors, prime ministers that were there, and we were discussing about the rise in anti-Semitism in the world today. And we had many panel discussions, and it was very interesting because I've been invited to many of these conferences there at the Knesset before, and this is the very first one where there was really, really like a political bias in there against Prime Minister Netanyahu, which shocked me because he was the keynote speaker, even though he was sick, he didn't come, but also against Donald Trump, President Trump. So I would say more than half of Israelis like President Trump. As a matter of fact, recently they have minted a coin of President Trump with Cyrus, the king of Persia. Because talking to the most Orthodox Jews in Israel, they believe that President Trump is going to be the one to rebuild the temple. And we'll see. I've seen part of the peace plan he's ready to unveil when the time is right. I don't like a lot of it, but I think it would be very interesting if in that peace plan was to rebuild the temple. But let's start in Matthew 24. In verse 32, it says, "But learn the parable of this fig tree. When its branch becomes tender and it puts out leaves, you know that summer is near. So also you, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Truly I say to you, in no way will this generation pass away until all these things have occurred." So it's very interesting because this is part of what's called the Olivet prophecy. Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13 is all in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established, is all part of the end-time Olivet prophecy that Yeshua is giving on the Mount of Olives and telling everything that's going to happen in the end time. And what does he do? He talks about false religion, make sure nobody deceives you, and false peace. He talks about wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and pestilences. And it very much parallels when you look at Revelation 6 and the four horsemen of the apocalypse, that I'll get into a little later in the message. But then he tells you what will be the sign. Because many of the things in Matthew 24 actually happened in the first century. And a matter of fact, when Yeshua didn't return, the believers in the first century believed he was going to return by 70 AD, because the New Testament congregation started in 30 AD, and in their philosophy they was thinking there would be a 40-year second wilderness period, and that there would be a, during that time there would be a purification. And you could read the epistles of Paul, and he says it, the good news has gone to all the world. You could read Peter, the Apostle Peter, that also says the time is here, and even Jacob, the half-brother of Yeshua, that says the end is near. So many of the apostles, including the Apostle John, all thought Yeshua would be returning in the first century, and of course he didn't. But there was one very, very important thing that they missed, and it was this scripture. Watch the fig tree. Israel's the fig tree. We'll go into that in a minute in Jeremiah 24. But he says, watch the fig tree. And what is he showing you? He says, when its branch becomes tender and it puts out leaf, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, know it is near at the doors. Truly I tell you, in no way will this generation pass until all these things occur. So we know in Scripture that there are prophecies that go on for many years. The Daniel 9 prophecy, right? It's a prophecy of years. 70 Shavuots, literally is what it is. 70 70s, 490 years. That's interesting in itself, since this year is the 70th Shavuot since Israel's been a nation. It's the 70th year. I'll talk about that a little later, from 1948, but also the 70th Shavuot that they had. I'm not going to get into Daniel 9 prophecy today, but we know that that prophecy was for many years. Yeshua says here very clearly, once these things start to happen, it will all happen in one generation. What is that generation? That generation is when the fig tree is back. So that did not happen in the first century. Israel was not a sovereign nation. They stopped being a sovereign nation from the Babylonian captivity in 573, 572 BC. And in the days of Yeshua, they were not a sovereign nation. They were a Roman colony, I guess you could say, put it that way. But he says something very interesting, because I always say you have to think like an Israelite. I call it functional thinking. It's a whole class that I teach at the Bible school. But in Israel, the fig tree is a very interesting tree, because it's the only tree that I know of where usually, if you look at most trees, I come from New Jersey, I was born here in New Jersey, and you have typical 4 seasons, right? So what happens? When the spring comes, a lot of the trees have no leaves whatsoever, and then the green leaves come on, and then they come full, and then the little fruit starts coming out, and then the fruit becomes full green, and then it turns color, and then you eat it. But with the fig tree, it's very different. The fig tree, the leaf and the fruit come out at the same time very quickly. And that's what he's showing us. This is not going to be something that will be hundreds and hundreds of years, but it will all happen in one generation. So when Israel becomes a nation, 1948 is the beginning of that generation. Many things happened in 1948. It was the beginning of United Nations. It was the beginning of Council on Foreign Relations. So many things have happened. And what's very interesting is, when President Trump was elected last year, there's been this global order that's been there since 1948 under the United Nations, and that global order is to make a one-world government and a one-world religion. And that's why when Israel was voted in 1945 to become a state, the partition plan, it wasn't just a plan to make the state of Israel. It was a plan to make 2 states, an Arab state, not a Palestinian state, because there's no Palestinians in 1948, there's only Arabs. But it's to make an Arab state and to make a Jewish state side by side. The Jews accept the plan. They're very pragmatic. They say, we have nothing now, even though we only get half the land, we'll take it. The Arabs declare war on Israel immediately. So that was the plan in 1948. But Jerusalem was not part of that partition plan. Jerusalem was always to be an independent international city for all 3 religions, in which they planned on bringing in the anti-Messiah and those things. So everything comes down to that, and that's what we're going to get into today. I'm going to show you, really, Jerusalem is really the major problem here. It's not the land of Israel. A matter of fact, according to the peace plans that came from Oslo in 1993 and 1994, and then the roadmap by President Bush in the year 2000, and even Barack Obama in his, in my opinion, weak efforts to bring peace there from 2010 to 2014, the Israelis were actually willing to give 98% of the land in the West Bank and Gaza. Gaza, they've given all the land. It's the only time in the history that we know of where actual Jews were pulled out of the Gaza Strip. It was very traumatic. We were living there at that time, not in Gaza, but in Israel. And it was traumatic to see Jews pulling other Jews away from their land. But it's not about most of the land of Israel. If it was only about most of the land, then they probably can come up with something. It really comes down to Jerusalem, and that's why this shocking announcement that President Trump made from nowhere, that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel, and that's going to be the starting point, which has started all these problems. War is on the horizon there. We'll talk about that a little later too. But it was very shocking. And what happened? Most of the world did not follow America. You know, I think there were 6 countries or territories that agreed with Jerusalem being the eternal capital of Israel, and the rest of the world came against them, which we'll also talk about in a little while here. But let me go to Jeremiah 24. I just want to show you about Israel being the fig tree. Jeremiah 24, verse 1. Yahweh caused me to see, and behold, 2 baskets of figs set before the sanctuary of Yahweh. After Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, the rulers of Judah, and the craftsmen and the smiths from Jerusalem, and had brought them to Babylon. 1 basket had very good figs, like first-ripe figs, and the other basket had very bad figs, which could not be eaten from their badness. And Yahweh said to me, what do you see, Jeremiah? And he said, I see figs. The good figs are very good, and the bad figs bad, so that they cannot be eaten from their badness. Again, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, so says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, like these good figs, so I will acknowledge the exiles of Judah, whom I have sent out of this place into the land of the Chaldeans for good. For I will set my eyes on them for good, and I will bring them again to this land. And I will build them and not tear down, and I will plant them and not pluck up. And I will give them a heart to know me, that I am Yahweh, and they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim. For they shall return to me with their whole heart. And like the bad figs which cannot be eaten for badness, says Yahweh, I will make Zedekiah, and then he goes on from there. So, right here, clearly we see in Scripture that Israel is the fig tree. Now, the other thing was, if people understood prophecy, they would understand that Yahweh actually gave the exact time that Israel would be in prophecy. If we go to Leviticus 26 and verse 18. Leviticus 26 and verse 18. And if after these things you will not listen to me, then I will chastise you 7 times more for your sins. So, what's happening here? Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 are called the chapters of blessing and cursing, where Yahweh is telling the nation of Israel, now that they're in the land, that if you're obedient to my Torah and my statutes and my judgments, then you'll stay in this land forever, and these are all the blessings you'll get. If not, all these cursings are going to come upon you. And here he clearly says, 7 times duration. The word in Hebrew literally means a duration of punishment when we're looking at that word. Verse 19, and I will break the pride of your strength, and I will make your heavens as iron and your earth as copper. And your strength shall be consumed in vain, and your land shall not give her produce, and the tree of the land will not give its fruit. And if you walk contrary to me, and are not willing to listen to me, then I will bring 7 times more plagues on you according to your sins, and send against you the beasts of the field, and it shall bereave you. And I shall cut off your livestock, and shall make you few, so that your ways are desolate. And if you are not chastised me by these things, and shall walk contrary to me, then I also will walk contrary to you, and will smite you, even I, 7 times more for your sins. So here it is, he's saying, the punishment will be 7 times, 7 times, 7 times, 7 times. If you take a prophetic year, which is 360 days in Scripture, and you times it by this 7 duration, you literally come up with 2,520 is the number. In Numbers 14:34, he says, by the number of days which you spied out the land, 40 days, a day for a year, a day for a year. You shall bear your iniquity 40 years, you shall know my alienation from you. So we see that the punishment that's going to be for being cast out of the land of Israel, or not being allowed to come into the land of Israel, is a day for a year is the principle. So when you're looking at a day for a year principle here, it is really amazing that when you take the year that Israel is fully in captivity, 573, 572 BC, and you add 2,520, remember there's no zero year, it goes from 1 BC to 1 AD, you literally come out with 1948, the very year that Israel is a nation. So it's amazing prophecy. The odds of that happening, about a quadrillion, billion, put about 19 zeros at the end of that to 1. I mean, for that to happen, for not only for Yahweh to resurrect the nation in the end time, but to tell us the exact time that that nation would be resurrected, and then it happens from that, is absolutely amazing. So, can a nation be born in one day? Let's see what the Bible says. Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66 and verse 7. He says, before she travailed, she brought forth. Before pain came to her, she delivered a male child. Who has heard a thing like this? Who has seen things like these? Shall the earth be brought forth in one day? Shall a nation be born in one step? For Zion travailed and also brought forth her sons. Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth, says Yahweh? Surely I cause birth and restrain, says your Elohim. Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with her, all who love her. Rejoice and rejoicing with her, all who mourn for her. So wow, here it is, we see that literally Israel is brought forth in one day. May 14th, 1948, exactly 70 years ago, Israel becomes a nation again. After 2,520 years of nothing, of being in diaspora, of being, basically there's Jews all over the world. It's not even like they were in one spot. Today in Israel, you can meet Jews that come from Morocco, you can meet Jews that come from America, you can meet Jews that come from Switzerland and Austria and Germany, and you can meet Jews that come from Iraq and Iran in some of these areas there. Matter of fact, just recently, it was shocking, just maybe a month ago, that Prime Minister Netanyahu came out in the news and was showing evidence that Iran has not stopped their nuclear program. And the way they got that evidence is that they actually have Jews on the inside there that have infiltrated the very highest parts of the Iranian government, that have dedicated their whole life to stay there in Iran, because they're even born there, to save the nation of Israel, to protect the nation of Israel. So these are some of the miracles that we see. Can a nation be born in one day? Yes, a nation is born in one day. Unbelievable. And interesting enough that it was exactly May 14th, the very day, 70 years to the day that Israel was a nation again, that America opened up their embassy in Jerusalem. So, very prophetic for many things. Let's look at a couple of scriptures about this. Again, I can go in a whole message just on the scriptures about Israel being a nation again in the end time, but I want to go into some different things. So let's go to Ezekiel 36. I want to go to some of these scriptures, though, to show there are more than 100 scriptures. There might be up to 120 altogether, somewhere in that area, showing Israel being a nation again in the end time. But I'm just going to go through a handful today. And Ezekiel 36 is a great chapter that talks about this. Ezekiel 36 and verse 1 says, And you, son of man, prophesy to Israel's mountains and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahweh. So again, there's no doubt it's a prophecy. He says it. It's a prophecy about the end time. We see this with much of the book of Ezekiel. And let's see what he says over here now. Verse 12. Yea, I will cause men to walk on you, my people Israel, and they shall possess you, and you will be an inheritance to them, and will not any more increase their bereavement. So we see that they're talking about Israel becoming a nation again. First, they're talking about them going into the diaspora, and then being a nation again. If we drop down to verse 22. Therefore say to the house of Israel, So says Adonai Yahweh, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but only for my holy name, which you profaned among the nations there where you went. And I will sanctify my great name, which was profaned among the nations, which you profaned among them. And the nation shall know that I am Yahweh, declares Adonai Yahweh, when I am sanctified in you in their eyes. For I will take you from the nations and gather you out of all the lands and bring you into your land. Then I will sprinkle pure waters on you, waters of baptism, and you will be purified. I will cleanse you from all your defilement and all your idols. And I will also give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk on my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be a people to me, and I will be Elohim to you. And I will also save you from all your defilements, and I will call for grain and increase it, and I will not put a famine on you. And I will multiply the fruit of the tree and the produce of the field, in order that you will not anymore receive the disgrace of famine among the nations. Now just to stop there for a minute, this alone is an amazing miracle. Because, like I said, in 1948, when Israel becomes a nation again, the land is filled with malaria. You know, per square mile, I think the largest malaria in the world. We got a lot of trees from Australia to help us with that. So anybody comes from Australia, thank you for that. You know, all over Israel you can see eucalyptic trees because of the malaria and whatnot. But in a very short period of time, in just 70 years, if you go around Israel today is #1 in the world in organic growing. Even in the desert, you go down in the Negev, they're growing grass, and they're growing fruit trees and palm trees, all there. Yet, if you go to Jordan, and you go to Iraq, and you go to these other areas, Syria, these countries have been there for thousands of years and have never went into captivity, and it's like a desolate wilderness. You know, it's the Middle East, it's semi-arid. Some of them are desert, Saudi Arabia. And yet, just like the scripture says here, that Yahweh says, when I bring you back to the land, I will make your land fertile. So people will know I'm doing this. And it didn't take hundreds and hundreds of years to do it. It's taking one short generation. And now it's unbelievable what they're producing in the land of Israel. Verse 31, and you will remember your evil ways and your doings that were not good, and you will despise yourself in your own eyes for your iniquities and for your abominations. Let it be known to you that I am not doing this for your sake, states Adonai Yahweh. Be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Israel. So says Adonai Yahweh, in the day I cleanse you from all your iniquities, I will cause the cities to be inhabited, and the ways shall be built. And the desolated land will be cultivated rather than being in ruin in the eyes of all passed by. And they shall say, the land that was desolated has become like the Garden of Eden. And the wasted and desolated and razed cities are fortified and inhabited. And the nations left all around you will know that I, Yahweh, built the raised places and planted that which was desolated. I, Yahweh, have spoken and will do it. Just in the last year, a couple of things that have happened in Israel is we know worldwide, because of food famines, there's a lot of GMO foods that are being grown all over the world. Israel's no different. Most of Israel's grain is GMO. But recently they actually found grain from the time of King David. And they're taking that original grain that doesn't have all GMO, it hasn't been manipulated, and they're trying to reproduce it now. Same with wine. They found wine from the time of King Solomon and King David, and they're trying to produce the wine the way it was. And I don't know if they understand why they're doing it, but the Bible says it. Everything is going back to Eden. Everything is going back to the natural way it was. And here it is, they're doing it. We're living in a time where we're seeing these things with our eyes and how they're doing it. And verse 38 says, like a holy flock, like the flock of Jerusalem in her appointed feast, so the waste cities will be filled with flocks of men, and they will know that I am Yahweh. So we know Jerusalem is a place where not only Judah comes up for feast time, but all Israel comes up. And we've been blessed. I consider it one of the greatest blessings of my life that for 18 years I've been allowed to host the feast days in Jerusalem. We get brethren from around 25 to 30 different countries who come with us. Not a big group. Our groups are anywhere from 60 to 80. We've had up to 200. But again, we got representation all over the world. And I believe we're fulfilling the scripture because he says it in the end time. That again, the Israelites will be coming to Israel to keep the feast days. And we know when Yeshua returns, whoever doesn't come up from any of the countries on the earth for Sukkot, their country will not get rain and they will not be blessed. So we are a foreshadow for that. Zechariah 1 in verse 16 and 17 says, "So Yahweh says this, I have returned to Jerusalem with compassions. My house shall be built in it, says Yahweh of hosts, and a line shall be stretched over Jerusalem. Cry out again, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, my city shall again overflow with goodness, and Yahweh will yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem." So again, we see these things happening today. Very interesting. In January, I was contacted by the History Channel. They were doing a documentary in Jerusalem on where the Temple Mount really was, and they asked me would I be part of this documentary. I said, sure. So I went there. We were filming. I got there very early in the morning. I was a little nervous in the Arab area on the Mount of Olives at 4:30 in the morning, thinking, uh-oh, it's not the great area to be in, but it worked out well. We did several hours of filming, and I shared with them all about where the temple was really in the city of David. So I was actually leaving the next day for our mission trip to India. Not India, I'm sorry, to Asia, to different places there. And I got contacted that night by the crew again, the filming crew, and they said, we'd like you to come back tomorrow. There's something we didn't tell you. And I said, well, okay, it would have to be early because my flight leaves in the afternoon. They said, no problem, meet us in the city of David. And when I got there is when they shared to me, they weren't not just doing a documentary about where the real Temple Mount is, but that they discovered a new Bible code that is clearly, the mathematical odds that the Bible code is not from Elohim are just impossible. The surface text fits underneath, and they say it's like a DNA of Scripture that comes in there. So I was very interested with it, considering that the code also showed that the temple was in the city of David. So it was amazing for me to be there, but also the code has shown where the Ark of the Covenant is, and it's something that I believe will come out, and I don't think it'll be that far in the future, only Yahweh knows, but if he's bringing these things out now, they have to be for a reason. And if the Ark of the Covenant is found, clearly they are going to build a temple. Not a temple that will matter to us. The Jewish temple they're going to build is going to be the temple for the anti-Messiah, but it's showing us how fast things are going. Because Yahweh will build the temple, or Yeshua will build the temple for David in the city of David. And the temple they're going to build, which probably will be in the wrong place, in the Fort Antonia, it's going to be the anti-Messiah's temple. But we're living in these days, we're seeing it now come about, and I just talked to somebody about a week ago that are claiming that the rabbis actually know exactly now where the Ark is. They may have located it, but they can't publicly come out with it, because when they publicly come out with it, you have to put it somewhere. You can't leave it in your garage. Somebody gave us a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. We have it up in our storage where we keep the feast, but that's a replica. We can store it up there. It doesn't make a difference. But the real Ark of the Covenant, you can't keep in a garage somewhere, you know? I mean, there's an organization in Israel called the Temple Institute, where they are remaking all of the things they need to have a third temple. You know, you have to have all the priest garments, you have to have the laborers and all the different utensils that they use. They have around 89 out of 93. But I talked to the man, Chaim Richmond, years ago, met him many times, and they are not very prophetic. They're not pushing it. They're saying when Elohim, in his timing, he will bring these things out. But my question to him even years ago was, well, what if the Ark of the Covenant was ever found? He said, well, if that was the case, there'd be World War III. We would fight and we would immediately be moving, because we would take it. Even non-religious Jews would take it as a sign from heaven that it's time. You have to build the temple if the Ark is there. They just don't understand it's not Yahweh's temple. So, Zechariah 12 and verse 6. Zechariah 12 and in that day I will make the leaders of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire among cut grain. And they shall devour all the people all around, on the right and on the left. And Jerusalem will be inhabited again in her place in Jerusalem. So here it is, after 2,520 years. You know, when Israel becomes a nation in 1948, they did not have control of Jerusalem. A matter of fact, the few Jews that were living in the old city in Jerusalem were expelled. So think about it. You become a nation after 2,520 years. This is so important. It's so prophetic. And for 19 years, you can't go to Jerusalem. You can't go in there. You can't see it. And it wasn't until the Six-Day War that they overtook it and took Jerusalem. And it was really, really a dramatic time for those people. It also says here, the leaders of Judah will be like a hearth of fire. When did that ever happen? Read your Bible. Read about the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. The kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, except for Solomon, and Solomon had peace all around because Yahweh said it that way, and possibly King David. But Israel was never a military power when they were a nation there. It was always the opposite. They were making military alignments with either Egypt or with Assyria or with Babylon, whatever it was. But here it says, not only are they going to come in the end time and be a nation again, but they are going to be a powerful nation. Israel today is the 4th or 5th most powerful military in the world. And the only reason why, in the last 2 years, Israel has attacked Iran and Syria about 100 times, and Iran hasn't attacked them back, is because they know they can't right now. They're planning things, but they can't. Iran is not strong enough to overtake Israel, and Israel knows it, and part of the problem is they're getting a little too cocky. They're not fearing Iran the way they should, and of course with Russia, we'll talk about that a little later in the message also. So another prophecy here. Amos 9 in verse 13. Behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, that the plowman will overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him who draws along seed, and the mountain shall drip new must, and all the hills will be dissolved. And I will bring back the captivity of my people Israel, and they will build the waste cities and live in them. And they will plant vineyards and drink the wine of them. And they will make gardens and eat the fruit of them. And I will plant them on their land, and they will never again be pulled out of their land, which I have given to them, says Yahweh your Elohim. Really interesting. You know that the Jews do Torah reading every week. They don't just pick the week to say, let's read this. It's actually a 3-year Torah reading how they do it. Now they even do it in a 1-year reading. But originally it was a 3-year reading, which means every week for 3 years there'd be a different Torah reading. The first Sabbath that they were back in Israel after being a nation, May 14th, 1948, this was the very first Torah reading that was read. You know, the prophecy of them being there again, the prophecy of them being on their land and Yahweh putting them on their land. So now, think about it. With the prophecy comes a downside. You know, you got Arab neighbors all around you. You have, 500 million Arabs that are around them that want to destroy them. So it's not all hunky-dory. Somebody told me a story one time in Israel, and they said, that a man got up to the pearly gates, and he sees Yahweh, and he's saying, you're not supposed to be a respected person, right? Everybody's equal in your eyes. Why are the Jewish people the chosen people? And why are they getting the best of all this? And why are they getting the land? And he says, no, I'm equal. Wait till you see their neighbors. And it's true. I mean, you imagine it's like a nightmare that after 2,520 years, you're giving your land back, and you have Arabs all around you that want to destroy you from day one. In the 1948 war, Israel only had 3 tanks. They were counting bullets. They had very little equipment to work with. And at that time, they defeated hundreds of millions of Arabs, which was an absolute miracle at that time. But part of the plan at this time was that, if Israel did not have neighbors all around them that wanted to destroy them, especially our brother Judah, they have always been isolationists. And today, even if you go to Israel, the Jews are not looking to take anybody's land, right? You don't see them trying to take land from Jordan or land from Iraq or land from... They don't want it. All they want is to keep that tiny little piece of land given to them and for nobody to bother them. That's all they're looking for, They're looking for peace in all the wrong reasons, but at the same rate, that's what they want. So if Yahweh didn't set this up, that not only around them, but within their own country, there's 5 million Arabs that are in the country that want to destroy them, Israel would never fight back. The end time events could not happen. So that in itself is even a miracle. And remember, when Israel becomes a nation in 1948, that's also when the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan was also made. So Jordan, Yardan, coming from Dan, because of the Jordan River, was not a nation before that. Hardly any of the Arab nations were nations I believe Iraq was around 1960. So all of these lands were controlled by who? They were controlled by the British. They were controlled by the French. They were controlled, whatnot. So in 1948, we also see that Jordan becomes a land from the west bank of the Jordan River, going all the way to Iraq. That becomes the Hashemite kingdom, and that's where King Hussein and the kingdom comes from there. But the problem with the Arabs was they did not appreciate what was given to them. They also wanted the land of Israel. And we see that in prophecy. So let's go here to Ezekiel 35. And it's amazing how every single thing we see in the world today concerning Israel prophecy has all been written. All been written before time. Ezekiel 35 in verse 1. And the word of Yahweh was to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Mount Seir. That's the land of Jordan today. We've been there. We're going there again this fall. And I will stretch my hand against you, and I will make you a ruin and a waste. I will lay your cities waste, and you shall be a ruin. And they shall know that I am Yahweh. Because there was to you never-ending hatred, and you poured out the sons of Israel to the hands of the sword in the time of their calamity, and the time of the iniquity of the end. So this is an end-time scripture. Drop down to verse 10. Because you have said, and this is what they're saying there, the Arabs there in Jordan, these two nations and these two lands will be mine, and we will possess it. Yet Yahweh was there. Therefore, as I live, declared Adonai Yahweh, I will act by your anger and your envy, which you have done out of the hatred against them, and I will be known among them when I have judged you. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. I have heard all your revilings which you have spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, desolation. They are given to us for food. And that's exactly what they say. Push them into the sea. And you magnified with your mouth against me, and have multiplied your words against me. I have heard. So, very, very interesting, as we see this is exactly what happened in the prophecy, that there's a land of Jordan that's made. So the Palestinians already have a land. 70 to 80% of Jordanians are Palestinians. So if the Palestinians want a homeland, they have a homeland that's there already, but that's not good enough. They're saying, we want both lands. And it's very interesting. One of the main things holding up the peace process, because I've told you, at least 3 times, Israel has offered 98% of the land of the Palestinians to them. 98%. And the 2% they can't offer, because there are quarters that the Jews have to have their living on, they would exchange. So they said, well, we don't, even that 2% that we have to keep, we'll give you other land. So where is the holdup? The holdup is the Palestinians are saying, okay, we want 2 states. We want a Palestinian state, a new state where the Palestinians will live, and then we want an Israeli state, but in the Israeli state, once we make our state, we want the 7 million Palestinians that are living in diaspora, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and Iran. We want them all to not come into the new Palestinian state. We want them to go into the old Israeli state. So now you'll have majority of Palestinians in the Israeli state, and you'll have 2 states of Palestine. That's their plan, which will never ever happen. It's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. So this is exactly what Yahweh is saying, and it's amazing. Like I said, if you were a writer, you know, if you were a story writer, you couldn't write a book this good, you know, when you really think about it. Think about it. Anywhere else in the world, tell me today where a nation has neighbors that want to absolutely wipe them out and annihilate them. Even North Korea really doesn't want to annihilate South Korea. They just want to keep the status quo that's going there. In America, does Canada and Mexico want to annihilate America? It would be hard-pressed to find 1 or 2 countries in the whole world that literally want to annihilate their neighbors that are around them. Yet in Israel you have this there. And not, like I said, not just their neighbors around them, but the people within them. It's like the American Indians rising up here in America and want to destroy all the Americans, you know, and want their land back. But you just don't see it. Jeremiah 14 and verse 12. Jeremiah 14 verse 12 says, So says Yahweh against my evil neighbors who touch the inheritance which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. Behold, I will tear them from their land, and I will tear the house of Judah from among them. So, you know, even though Yahweh has covenant with Israel, and even though Yahweh has given the land of Israel to the 12 tribes of Israel, Yahweh's not against these other lands, right? Yahweh blessed Ishmael. Ishmael got a lot of blessings. Look in the Bible. Yahweh blessed Esau. So it's not that Yahweh's against these other people, and these people are actually taking their own blessing away. If you read Jeremiah from 45 to 49, and you look at the curses that are coming on these nations in the end time, the only reason they're getting cursed is because of what they're doing to Israel. If they would actually just say, hey, Israel's our brother, they're our cousin, we should be working together, they would be helping themselves in the long run and be getting the blessing from Yahweh. So they're only hurting themselves by what they're doing. Zechariah 12, 2 and 3, but again, it's all part of prophecy. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling to all people all around. And it shall also be against Judah in the siege against Jerusalem. And in that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the people. All who lift it shall be cut in pieces, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. Wow. Here's the prophecy, right? That all the earth, why? Why would all the earth be against Jerusalem? Jerusalem doesn't have oil. They don't have fossil fuel. They don't have gold. They don't have anything there. It's stone. So why would all the earth be focused on Jerusalem? And if you look at the United Nations, if you take all 188 members of the United Nations combined, there are more resolutions against that tiny state of Israel than every other nation on earth combined. Can you imagine? I mean, you have these things going on in Syria. You have atrocities going on there. 400,000 people that were killed, millions that are displaced, and they come up with one resolution against Syria? And yet Israel, if they blow their nose the wrong way, they got to meet, they got to have emergency meeting and all of this. It's absolutely absurd. But that's what the prophecy says. It literally says it. And if you think about it, Israel is a tiny little tribe, our brother Judah. They're not a big tribe. There might be 14, 15 million Jews worldwide. There's about 8 million living in the land of Israel. So they're not a very big tribe that's there. And yet, if you look at the world today, there are more Nobel Prize winners, more scientists, more, everything with agricultural growing, even with high tech. High tech isn't Silicon Valley anymore. High tech is in the land of Israel. Google and Facebook and all these companies all have their startups in Israel, which isn't always a good thing either. All the facial recognition, they're all coming from Israeli companies, which is going to come back to burn them. But the point is, from a worldly standpoint, you would think everyone would love Israel, because they're willing to share their technology with people. They're good neighbors. They're not looking to attack anybody. So why on earth would people hate Israel like nothing else? And it's shocking to me, because I think the only thing I've ever seen of more hatred than Israel is with Donald Trump, President Trump. And that boggles my mind too. Think about it, because President Trump is not a conservative. He doesn't have an ideology. He'll flip-flop on anything. And you would think he would be the Democrats' love boy, because he's saying he's a Republican, but he'll do Democratic things. And yet they hate him. They absolutely hate him because he's not part of the plan. He's not part of the 70-year global plan to bring a new world order with the religious headquarters in Jerusalem. And now, claiming Jerusalem is the headquarters for Yahweh, wow, he really threw a monkey wrench in their plan there. So this is what I tell my friends in the Knesset when I go there. I tell them the problem, while you're not getting pieces, you're trying to solve a spiritual problem with physical means. It's not a physical problem. It's not about land. 2 years ago, General Assisi, the new general, but he's been there now at least 5 years, from Egypt, he offered the Palestinians double the land they have in the Gaza Strip on the Egyptian side, and the whole world community would have given them billions and billions of dollars. They'd be the new Dubai. And they would not only did they turn it down, they would not even talk about it. They wouldn't even talk about it. And the Gaza Strip it's a hellhole there. I mean, they have no electricity, they have no water, unemployment 60%. If somebody wanted to give you double land and rebuild it beautiful, why wouldn't you even talk about it? It makes no sense until you understand what we're dealing with here is, like it says, we're going back to the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, you had Yahweh against Satan, you had judicial order against rebellion, and this is what we've been dealing with for 6,000 years. You're dealing with a spiritual problem a being, you know, Satan, the devil, who has influenced mankind with his world systems. We know that Satan is the God of this world. How do we know it? Because the Bible tells us, and even when Yeshua is coming before him in Mark 4 and Matthew 4 and Luke, I believe it's Luke 4 also, and he's saying, you know, all these kingdoms have been given to me, and I'll give them to you if you'll bow down and worship before me. So we see what's happening here, but like I said, as we're living this, it should actually absolutely be shocking and exciting to us to see these scriptures all coming alive. To see not one or two, but hundreds of scriptures about the end time, all being placed and coming in together. And like I said, sadly, all nations being against Israel. I think it was only 6 nations or territories voted for them. I had the blessing, I was in Papua New Guinea very shortly after that vote happened. And by my visit to Papua New Guinea, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea decided to change his vote and vote for Israel. So praise Yahweh for that. And Papua New Guinea is an amazing place. We saw several miracles there. There were 2 people completely blind who were prayed for and got their eyesight back. And just really, really faith-filled people in Papua New Guinea. Zechariah 1 in verse 18. Zechariah 1 in verse 18. He says, "Then I lifted up my eyes, and looked, behold, 4 horns. And I said to the messenger who was talking to me, what are these? And he answered, these are the horns that have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And Yahweh made me see 4 craft masons. And I said, what are these coming to do? And he spoke, saying, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so no man lifts up his head. But these have come to terrify them, to throw down the horns of the nations who lifted up their horn over the land of Judah to scatter it." So it's really, really interesting. And I don't know if I've ever seen anywhere else in the Bible where it talked about craft masons. You know, when you look at today, who is running the New World Order, the global elite? It's the Freemasons to one degree or another. They have different organizations, the Committee of 300, the Bilderbergers, and all these different things. But the primary basis of all of it is that Freemasonry. And Freemasonry comes from craft masons. That's how it started, the compass and the square. And these are craft masons, right? And there's 4 of them. Very interesting. In 2003, under President Bush, they created something called the Quartet. Quartet means 4. And it's the United States, the UN, the EU, and Russia. And their whole purpose of that quartet is to bring apart a Palestinian state and to make Jerusalem its headquarters. So the prophecy is right here. And it says literally that this quartet, these 4 Freemasons, craft masons, that their only purpose that's there is to divide Jerusalem. So Yahweh will allow this. This is the unfortunate part, because unfortunately our brother Judah is fairly hard-headed, I guess the way we are. When you look at Ephraim, you know, and read the first 13 chapters of Ezekiel, you see that Ephraimites, we're not less hard-headed than they are, but they're also hard-headed. And it's really sad for me, of someone who's lived in Israel for so long, to see how secular it's become. Coming here and telling you about that is nothing new, because I think America is definitely ahead of Israel as far as being secular, but while not by much. Abortion is the highest per capita in the world, in Israel. And Eilat is the homosexual capital of the world. I mean, you have all these things that are going on there. And like I try to tell the people there, Yahweh did not make you a nation again after 2,520 years for this. Not by far, you know, and moles going up everywhere and all the stores that you have in America. But Israel is coming. There's a time of punishment that's coming, and I don't think that time is that far away. As we're seeing the chess game come together, and I just read an article yesterday in the paper that President Putin now has come out and told President Trump, he said, look, we're at a standstill. He said, either we need to go to the negotiating table and start negotiating this world order, or the only other avenue you're leaving us is military. Because Russia has been sidelined, they have sanctions, everything going against them. And we know that Russia is the backbone in Syria up there. So we see the players that are coming together and bringing these things. Jeremiah 30. Jeremiah 30 talks about this time. It says, the word that came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, so speaks Yahweh Elohim of Israel, saying, write for yourself all the words I have spoken to you in a book. For lo, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will turn the captivity of my people Israel and Judah. So it's both houses of Israel, says Yahweh, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they will possess it. And these are the words that Yahweh spoke concerning Israel and concerning Judah. For so says Yahweh, we have heard a sound of trembling and dread, and not of peace. Ask now and see whether a male is giving birth. Why do I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman giving birth, and all faces are turned to paleness? Alas, for that day is great, for none is like it. It is a time of Jacob's trouble, but he will be saved out of it. And that's what we're getting ready to go into. We're getting ready to go into the time of Jacob's trouble. Zechariah 13. Zechariah 13 in verse 1 says, in that day, whenever you see in the Bible, in that day and at that time, it's a Jewish idiom meaning the end time. In that day, a fountain will be opened to the house of David and to those living in Jerusalem for sin and for impurity. Very interesting. Just a couple of years ago, I think it was about 6 years ago, they found the original pool of Siloam. And you read in the book of John, right? I think it's John 9, where the man is coming and Yeshua's putting mud on his eyes and says, go to the pool of Siloam and you'll be healed. The original pool of Siloam, by an accident, they found it. They were putting in a sewage piping because the sewage is really bad there. It's an Arab village where this area is. And the archaeologist that was doing the digging in the city of David just happened to be there that day, and he heard the scraping. And as soon as he heard it, he knew something was up. He ran to the people with the tractor. He showed him his badge. He said, please stop all digging over here. And they found the pool of Siloam. It winds up being an acre big and the world's biggest mikveh. Mikveh meaning ceremonial washings, right? Before baptism came, they had mikveh where people would go into the washing before they would go to the temple, before they would give a sacrifice, before the priest could do his duties, they would do it. And it was usually very small, like a bathtub. That's the size of mikvahs. This is a mikveh that is actually an acre big. 10,000 people purifying themselves at one time. And it's amazing that they find this. And look what the Bible says. In that day, are they a fountain? And it literally means, a place of purification will be open to the house of David and those living in Jerusalem for sin and for impurity. And they find it. Drop down to verse 8. And it shall be in all the land, says Yahweh, 2 parts in it will be cut off and perish, but the third will be left in it. And I will bring the third through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. And they will call out my name, and I will answer them. I will say, it is my people, and they will say, Yahweh is my Elohim. So here we see that it's not going to be pretty for Israel. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of press back for teaching this, that Israel is going to lose their sovereignty again. 2/3 of the people there are going to die, and the last third is going to go through purification. Maybe 1/10 of that will come out. But it's going to be horrific. And when this happens, many people are going to wonder, what's going on here? I thought Yahweh was redeeming Israel the end time. Why is this happening? Maybe, no. You have to put all the prophecies together. Yes, Yahweh is redeeming the nation of Israel, but unfortunately, Israel has not taken the things that the Father wants to give to them, and they're going to go through a very severe chastising, as the same as this country's going to. And my surmise is they'll happen together. Because once America is not there to protect Israel, that's when Israel's enemies are going to come against them real quick. And I think that it's going to happen very similar at the same time. Why is this happening? Jeremiah 6 in verse 13. Because the people in Israel are not looking to Yahweh for their salvation. They're not looking to Yahweh for their strength. They're saying, the IDF, we can protect ourselves. Jeremiah 6 and verse 13. It says, from everyone, from the least of them even to the greatest of them, cuts off a prophet. And from the prophet even to the priest, everyone deals falsely. You see it there. You'll see the corruption that's in organized religion in Israel, in the Jewish faith, Orthodox faith. is very, very bad. They have also healed the break of my people, saying, peace, peace, where there is no peace. Were they ashamed when they made an abomination? They were not at all ashamed, nor did they know to blush. So they shall fall among those who fall. At the time I visit them, they shall cast down, says Yahweh. So here it is. Since 1993 and 94, they've been making this Oslo agreement. They've been talking about dividing the land. So Yahweh is protecting them and giving them the land back. And you have very leftist people in Israel that want to divide the land and give the land up. And Yahweh is saying, it's not good. They have healed the break of my people, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Verse 16. So says Yahweh, stand by the way and see, and ask for the old paths, where the good way is, and walk in it. And you will find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. Also I raised watchmen over you, saying, listen to the sound of the ram's horn. But they said, we will not listen. So hear, O nations, and know, O congregation, that which is coming on them. Hear, O earth, behold, I will bring evil on this people, the fruit of their thoughts, for they have not listened to my words and my Torah. They also rejected it. So, like I said, it grieves me to death, being there for 20 years and knowing that this is what's coming, and it doesn't have to be that way. So it's the same in our life. That's what Yahweh says in the book of Joel. He pleads for repentance, and to come and ask him for forgiveness, and we'll see. Jeremiah 8, verse 15. Jeremiah 8, verse 15 says, we looked for peace, but no good came. For a time of healing, but behold, terror. And very interesting, that word for terror in Hebrew is Hamas. So, we looked for peace, but no good came. A time for healing, but behold, Hamas. The very organization that's looking to destroy Israel, they're trying to make peace with, and it doesn't work that way. So, that's why things are not going good. Leviticus 25:23 says, and the land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, for you are aliens and tenants with me. So I say this to Jews in Israel, I say it to Palestinians in Israel, that actually the land does not belong to the Jews or the Arabs. The land belongs to Yahweh. And Yahweh has allowed Judah to be the custodian of the land, but they do not own the land. Yahweh owns the land. So it is not theirs to give up. And it's very interesting. When you're looking at the peace deal they're trying to make, Judah is not giving up their land. They don't even want to divide Jerusalem. They're giving up our land. They're giving up the West Bank. They're calling it West Bank. It's Samaria. It's all the land of the northern tribes is the land they're giving up. So I don't believe Yahweh is that happy with it. And I believe the peace deal they're trying to make. And I shudder when I hear about President Trump sending his son-in-law there and trying to resurrect this deal. That was an awful deal to begin with. Is not something that Yahweh is going to be happy with. But again, the kings of the earth are looking to bring in their global world order with their anti-Messiah. Psalm 2, we see this. Psalm the 2nd chapter. He says, why have the nations raged and the people are meditating on emptiness? The kings of the earth have placed themselves, yea, the rulers have plotted together against Yahweh and his Messiah, saying, we will break their bands in two and throw off their cords from us. He who sits in the heaven will laugh. Yahweh will mock at them. Then he will speak to them in his anger, and in his wrath he will terrify them. Yea, I have set my king on my holy mount, on Mount Zion. So everything in the end time is about resurrecting Jerusalem, resurrecting Mount Zion, of Yahweh bringing this restoration to the land of Israel. And you see the kings of the earth are fighting against that. That's why they're all against it. They're all against Israel. They're all against Yahweh. And the end result is to divide the land. But we know when the land is divided, it's going to bring chaos. It's going to bring the wrath of Yahweh. Joel 3, in verse 1, he says, for behold, in those days and at that time, our days today, when I bring again the exiles of Judah and Jerusalem, they're already there, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they divided my land. So, under no circumstances should we be supportive of any peace deal in which Israel is giving up land of Yahweh when he's redeeming that land in the end time. And that's why Satan wants the land, because he wants to thwart the plan of Yahweh. Yahweh promises redemption, Satan wants to try to take it back. And when they actually will do this, when that land is divided, it's going to bring the wrath of Yahweh, and it's going to bring the horsemen of the apocalypse. Revelation 6. Revelation 6. And I saw the Lamb open one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures like the sound of thunder saying, "Come and see." And I saw and behold a white horse, and one sitting on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out overcoming, that he might overcome. Some people think this is actually Yeshua, but it's not. It's the Anti-Messiah. Yeshua is coming in Revelation 19. Like I said, if you look at Matthew 24 and you parallel the very first thing that Matthew 24 says, when they're asking Yeshua, what is the sign of your coming in the end? Is deception. He's telling them about deception. So here we have false religion, false peace. And what happens from that? Is it going to bring peace? No. We know from Daniel 7, I won't go there, but the Anti-Messiah is a man of intrigues, right? And through peace, he destroys men. So where they're going to think, wow, this is the greatest thing in the world. Israel is actually getting peace with the Arabs. It's going to bring the beginning of the end. And what comes from there? He opened the second seal, and I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." And another horse went out red, and it was given to the one sitting on it to take peace from the earth, and that they should slay one another, and a great sword was given him. So when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes. Also, actually, the agreement is called the peace and safety agreement. And that's the scary part of it. But the false peace will come first. What does it bring? War, the red horse. And then he opened the third seal, and I saw the third living creature saying, "Come and see." And I saw, behold, a black horse, and the one sitting on it having balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A measure of wheat for a denarius, and 3 measures of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil of the wine." So it's bringing famine, it's bringing pestilence. And then the fourth seal, he heard a voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." And I saw, and behold, a pale green horse, and the name of the one sitting on it was Death. Hades had followed him, and authority was given them to kill over a fourth of the earth with sword, with famine, with death, and the wild beasts of the earth. So we see that the false peace brings the wrath of Yahweh. The wrath of Yahweh brings the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the white, the black, the green, and the red. And what is the main thing that any entity or country is known by is their flag. And I find it very interesting that the exact colors, the green, the white, the red, and the black, are the exact colors of the Palestinian flag. So when we're looking at this, nothing happens by accident. Absolutely nothing happens by accident. And we are seeing this set up. The same way when it talks about the destruction of Babylon. Who destroys Babylon? The Persians and the Medes. Who are they? They're the Russians and the Iranians. You know, Iran up to 1926 was still called Persia. And now what do we see? We see the alliance of these countries coming together against Israel, against the United States. Zechariah 1 in verse 2. Zechariah 1 in verse 2. Very interesting parallel to what we just read here in Revelation. He says, "Yahweh has been angry with your fathers, very angry. Therefore you say to them, so says Yahweh of hosts, turn back to me, says Yahweh of hosts, and I will turn back to you, says Yahweh of hosts. Do not be as your fathers, to whom the former prophets have proclaimed to them, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, turn back now from your evil ways and your evil doings. But they did not hear or pay attention to me, says Yahweh." So we're seeing the same thing in the end happening in the country of Israel. It's the same thing that happened in ancient times. They just wouldn't change. If we drop down to verse 8, he says, "And I saw at night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. And he stood among the myrtle trees in the ravine. And behind him were red, speckled, and white horses," just like we see in Revelation. "Then I said, my master, what are these? And the messenger who was speaking with me said to me, I will show you what these are. And the man who stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, these are those whom Yahweh has sent to walk to and fro through the earth. And they answered the messenger of Yahweh who stood among the myrtle trees and said, we have walked to and fro the earth, and behold, all the earth sits still and is at peace. And the messenger of Yahweh answered and said, O Yahweh of hosts, until when will you not have pity on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which you have cursed these 70 years? And I find it very interesting that this year is exactly 70 years of modern Israel being a nation again. And Yahweh answered the messenger who was talking with me with good words, words of comfort. So the messenger who was talking with me said to me, cry out, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Mount Zion with a great jealousy, and with great anger I am angered at the haughty nations, in that I was but a little angry, and they gave help for evil. So Yahweh says this, I have returned to Jerusalem with compassions. My house shall be built, and it says Yahweh of hosts, and a line shall be stretched over Jerusalem. Cry out again, saying, so says Yahweh of hosts, my cities will again overflow with goodness, and Yahweh will yet comfort Mount Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. So this is what it comes down to. It's a battle for Jerusalem. It's a battle for the end time, and everybody is taking their place. Just in the last maybe 10 minutes before we end here, when you're looking at the Arabs on the news, they'll say it's a very complicated situation. To one degree it is, because you have different types of Arabs. You have Sunni Arabs that basically are Egypt. I would say probably 70% of the Arab world are Sunnis. And then you have Shiites. It's just a different sect. The Iranians are Shiite. Half of them in Syria are Shiite. Some of them in Iraq are Shiite. But the Shiites and the Sunnis really don't get along. Yet, what people don't understand, that in the Arab world, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that Arabs will put their differences aside to fight you, and then when they kill you, then they'll fight each other again. It's just, it's that Ishmael prophecy. He will be, a wild ass of a man, and his hand will be against everybody, and everybody will be against him. And here we're living it. I mean, we actually see it every day when we're seeing all this craziness going on with all the Arabs and the fighting that's going on in the Middle East over there. But what I've been saying for many years is the country that we should watch for is Turkey. Years ago when I said this, people laughed because they said Turkey is a secular nation. They don't even, according to their constitution from Ataturk, who took over when the Ottoman Empire fell apart, they're not even allowed to be religious. But that was a long, long time ago. Because when we look at the nation of Turkey in just the last 10 years or so, Turkey has changed dramatically. And Erdogan, the president of Turkey, you could say dictator of Turkey now, in the last 2 years, has killed thousands of people, of opponents. He has put more than 100,000 people in prison, has taken their jobs away, and literally, he's trying to bring back the Ottoman Empire. What is the Ottoman Empire? When we look at Jerusalem, and if you come to Israel, there's a place called the Tower of David where they tell the whole history of Jerusalem. It's an awesome place because you really have to understand the history of Jerusalem to understand what's happening today, because it's like a clock. It's like a watch, and it just goes around, and all the history is connected to each other. From the time that the Canaanites were first in the land before Israel gets in there, and then Israel comes into the land, and then after Israel is in the land, and the Greeks are there, and the Romans are there, and then after the Roman time period that you had the Arab conquest, and then the Mamelukes, who were type of Arabs but a little different for a time, and then the Ottomans came in 1517 till 1917. So the Ottoman Turks, who are also Arabs, and they controlled it, and it was the longest running empire, for the Arabs that they had there, and it just ended in 1917. When it ended in 1917, that's when the British Mandate came in. That's when the Balfour Declaration, that Lord Balfour of Britain said that Israel can have an aspiration of being a country again, and they held that for 50 years until 1967 when Israel takes back Jerusalem again. But all of this runs in a circular pattern, and it's really interesting. But from the time that Erdogan has gotten in there, he has talked about starting again the Ottoman Empire, bringing the Ottoman Empire together. What's very interesting about the Ottoman Empire? What's very interesting about the Ottoman Empire is if we go to the book of Obadiah, let's go there. that if you look at the Edomites that were originally in the land of Jordan, and you could look historically that the Edomites traveled east to Asia, and then they wound up settling back in Asia Minor, which is the land of Turkey. So, not all of Turkey today, it's probably split, but a good part of Turkey today are Edomites, where they come from. And when we look at Obadiah, it's a very interesting prophecy. I'll start in verse 6. It says, how Esau is searched out. His hidden things are sought for. All the men of your covenant have dismissed you to the border. The men who were at peace with you have deceived you, have prevailed over you. They are setting your bread as a snare unto you. There is no understanding in him. Shall I not in that day even destroy the wise out of Edom and understanding out of the mount of Esau, declares Yahweh? And your mighty ones, O Teman, Ottoman. Teman is the main tribe of the Ottoman Empire and the main tribe of Esau. So when he says, O Teman, Ottoman, shall be afraid, so that each man from the mountains of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. Shame shall cover you from the violence, again that word is Hamas, against your brother Jacob, and you shall be cut off forever. What is Turkey doing today? Turkey is supporting Hamas and supporting the Palestinians. As a matter of fact, Turkey came out just a little over a week ago, and they are having a big Arab summit, I think it's this week, and they are trying to convince all the Arab nations to combine together against Israel. They're talking about this for a while, but now they're actually looking to do it. And he says, on the day of your standing on the other side, on the day that the stranger took his force captive, and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, even you were like one of them. But you should not have looked on the day of your brother, on the day of his alienation. Nor should you have rejoiced over the sons of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor should you have enlarged your mouth in the day of distress. You should not have entered into my people's gate on the day of calamity. Also, you should not have looked on his evil in the day of his calamity, nor should you have sent out against his force in the day of his calamity. Nor should you have stood on the crossways to cut off those of him who escaped. Nor should you have shut up his survivors in the day of distress. So this is all saying what Turkey is going to do in this next war. For the day of Yahweh is near on all nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your reward shall be on your own head. So very clearly, it's end time. And really, it's interesting because when you think about it, Esau is the brother of Yaakov, of Jacob, right? I mean, they're brothers. They should be sticking together. In Turkey, they're not Arabs, Turkey. They're Muslims, but they're not Arabs. And even when you look at Turks, you could see the resemblance more of the Israeli side than you could see of the Turkish side. But if we go to Psalm 83, because this is the next war that's coming, there's something very interesting in this prophecy in Psalm 83. This war has never happened in Israel because there's one very interesting player missing out of this war, and that's Egypt. Every modern war of Israel, including the Independence War in 48, the war in 52, 56, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, every war Egypt has been the major foe that they've been fighting against. Of course, with Syria and with Iraq, but Egypt is not in this war that's here in Psalm 83. And it's pretty interesting. Now Egypt is siding not with the side of Turkey and the other ones. He says, O Elohim, do not keep silent to yourself. Do not be speechless. Yea, do not be still, O El. For lo, your enemies are roaring, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They take shrewd counsel against your people. They plot against your hidden ones. They have said, come, and we will cut them off from being a nation. That's what they say. We're going to push Israel into the sea, and that the name of Israel will not be recalled again. For they conspired together with one heart. They have cut a covenant against you. Even the tents of Edom and of the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagarites, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, Philistia and those living in Tyre. Also Assyria has joined with them. They were an arm to the sons of Lot, Selah. So when you look at who these countries are, the modern countries, it's Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, and the Palestinian areas. Now what's interesting about this is every one of these countries named here, all 10 of these, are part of the old Ottoman Empire. Every single one of them. So here it is, Turkey is trying to bring that back in the Caliphate. The Caliphate is like the Muslim Messiah that they're trying to reenact there. And I said that when ISIS started. I gave a really interesting message on ISIS a couple of years ago, showing ISIS being the fulfillment of the Assyrian Empire. But I said, ISIS won't last. ISIS is the beginning of this. When ISIS peters out, Turkey will be the one. And if you talk to Arabs, which I do a lot there, the Arabs all say if Turkey is a world power, they will support them. Because the Arabs are feeling like disgraced. They're feeling we keep going to war and losing. Israel keeps, embarrassing us. And they're looking for some kind of face to show in this. And they're all looking toward Turkey. And Turkey is looking to take this lead. And it's very interesting because, like I said, Psalm 83, every nation that's mentioned there is part of the old Ottoman Empire. And Obadiah is saying it's the Ottoman Empire that's going to come from there. Also, about a month ago, Turkey, Iran, and Russia recently made a military pact. You could look online about this. You see the three leaders all holding hands together for that. Because, again, Russia, in this, I mean, world power, military power, certainly Russia is going to side with Iran and China and these other ones that are coming there. And you really, I think for at least 3 or 4 years, the world powers have been putting their proxies out. You know, you look at ISIS as nothing more than a proxy. Some ISIS are proxies on the side of U.S., some on the side of Russia. And that's what you see in Syria. You see ISIS in Syria, part of them that are being funded by U.S. and part of them being funded by Russia. They're basic just mercenaries, the way it used to be in the olden days. But they're almost to the point now where you're not fighting a mercenary war anymore. You're getting to the point where the players are coming up to come together. 2 more scriptures, and then we will end here. And I'll open up if there's any questions after that. Psalm 102. Psalm 102, an amazing psalm. Amazing prophecy of the time we're talking about here. I won't read the whole psalm here. But in the beginning it says, a prayer of the afflicted when he is faint and pours out his complaint before Yahweh. And then it goes into what I believe is clearly showing the Holocaust and what Israel went through. Talks about in verse 5, verse 4, my heart is stricken and dried like grass, so I forget to eat my bread. Because of the voice of my sighing, my bones cleave to my flesh. And in the Holocaust, the way you couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman because of how skinny they were from not eating. My enemies curse me all the day long. My very name has been used as a curse against me. The yellow armbands that they had to wear that said Yehuda, simply because they were Jews. There was no other reason they were being persecuted except that they were Jews. For I have eaten ashes like bread and mixed my drink with weeping. And they say the way the wind was blowing, when the people would be burned in the crematoriums, that literally ashes from family members would be blowing in their mouths. And it was a terrible, terrible time. To think 6 million Jews, 1.5 million children that were killed for nothing. Absolutely nothing, only because they were Jews. And this is the time we're living in. But then he says in verse 13, I'll start in verse 12. But you, O Yahweh, shall dwell forever in your memory to generation, generation. You shall arise, have mercy on Zion. For the time to pity her, yea, the appointed time is come. So the Moab, the appointed time is coming, right? We said Israel became a nation in one day, but it was exactly 2,520 years to the day when they went into captivity. So nothing happens by chance at the appointed time. For your servants take pleasure in its stones and pity its dust. Archaeology. There's 40,000 archaeological sites in Israel. Now, I have the blessing of working there with some of the top archaeologists in the world. I love it because it's all our history. But archaeology is only a science of about 130 years. And here it's saying, your servants take pleasure in its stones and pity its dust. So nations will fear the name of Yahweh, and all the kings of the earth your glory. When Yahweh will build up Zion, Mount Zion, he will appear in his glory. They've been building Mount Zion for close to 20 years, and now it's built. They only, in the last 20 years, have rebuilt Mount Zion. And when you talk to the archaeologists, they say everything we thought we knew about it is off the table. But now Mount Zion is rebuilt. And look at verse 18. This shall be written for the last generation, and people to be created shall praise Yahweh. Some translations put to a generation to come. That is not the translation from the Hebrew. Lador Acharon literally means this is written for the last generation. So the generation that saw the Holocaust, the generation that sees Israel, the fig tree, become a nation, the generation that sees Mount Zion rebuilt, is the generation that will see the Messiah appear. And here we are. And we're not early in that generation. You know, one of the things he talks about is rebuilding the Tabernacle of David. In 2014, they found the Tabernacle of David. I've seen it with my eyes. It is not publicly open, but the standing stone is there where the Ark of the Covenant stood. And that's one of the things he always says, that in the end time he will rebuild the Tabernacle of David. But wow, we're reading this. And like I said, these scriptures are 3,000 years old. And we're reading it from a standpoint of seeing with our eyes that these things are happening. I don't have to try to convince you because they've already happened. We're living in that time period that we're seeing. Last scripture I want to go in is Psalm 122. Psalm 122. Because one difference between us as Ephraimites, and when I say Ephraimites, not that every one of us is from the tribe of Ephraim, but from the northern tribes, right? Judah compiled Judah and Benjamin, and also Levi, and the northern tribes called Ephraim were the northern 10 tribes. But one difference between the northern tribes of Israel and the southern tribe of Ephraim is the fact that when the northern tribes went into their diaspora, right? And they went all the way from Africa to Europe, to the Caucasus areas, you know, that you see over there. But they assimilated with the countries that they went in. You know, so that's why even today, although we can show that certain countries have Israelite heritage to it, just like the British, right? British. That's a Hebrew word. Brit means covenant, Ish means man, the men of the covenant. And what are they? They're Anglo-Saxons, sons of Isaac. So we can clearly show through etymology, we can show through archaeology, we can show that these have Israelite heritage. But nobody can really prove you're an Israelite because we're about 30 generations removed from it, right? And in the Bible, what does it say? If you're an Edomite, you have to wait 10 generations until you come into the sanctuary. Because if it takes 10 generations to become an Israelite, then certainly in 10 generations you wouldn't be one. So it's not about us trying to say, I'm from the tribe of Dan or I'm from the tribe of Naphtali, although most of us do have some heritage in there. It's about showing Yahweh's promises in the end time, that those promises have never stopped. But our brother Judah never did that. When our brother Judah went into diaspora around the world for the last 2,500 years, they did stay separate for the most part. They didn't assimilate into the nations. So if you go to Iran, you'll see the Jewish section, or Morocco, or anywhere in the world, Egypt. You still see where they stayed separated. And I think part of our problem as Ephraimites in the end time is that we've forgotten Jerusalem. You know, it talks about in Psalm 137, if I forget you, let my tongue cleave to my mouth. Meaningly, don't even let me speak another word. And because of our diaspora, and being in diaspora so long, we've forgotten. You know, I hear all these crazy theories that come up. You know, you name it, I've heard it. You know, now the new one is the world is flat, or the earth is flat. Another theory that people come up with. But I was in Kenya, and they were trying to tell me, can Mount Kenya in Kenya beat Jerusalem, Mount Zion? And every time I hear these things, I chuckle and I say, you've been in diaspora too long. Come home, come there, come for a week, come for a tour. And you'll never think like that again. You'll never say something crazy like that again. Because there's only one Mount Zion. There's only one Jerusalem. There's only one Israel. And here it is, this tiny little place that's about the size of New Jersey, that Yahweh has preserved now 40,000 biblical places. Can you imagine? Anywhere you go there in Israel and you start digging, you come up with something. People are afraid to invest money because they invest money in this gigantic hotel and they put $50 million in, then they start digging and they find archaeology and they have to stop digging it. It's by law. Once you find archaeology, that hotel isn't going to go up for years and maybe the guy goes bankrupt. But we've been in diaspora too long and we're forgetting Jerusalem. And this is what it's about in the end time when you're looking at the restoration. Jerusalem is the center of the earth, and all the restoration is starting with Jerusalem and going all throughout the earth. So this is where I'm saying I'm not telling you like this is 1901, that this is going to happen in the next 50 years. I'm showing you today things that have been happening and happening and happening since 1948. And our focus has got to get back toward Jerusalem. It's got to get back toward where Yahweh is working and what Yahweh is doing. And that's why I want to end on this psalm, a song of ascent of King David, right? I was glad when they said to me, let us go up to the house of Yahweh. Our feet will stand within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is joined to itself together. There the tribes go up, the tribes of Yah, to the testimony of Israel, to give thanks to the name of Yahweh. For the throne of judgment were established there, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Those who love you shall prosper. Peace within your walls, prosperity in your towers. Because of my brothers and my companions, I will now say, peace be in you. Because of the house of Yahweh or Elohim, I will seek your good. Wow. And here we're living in a time where they're seeking peace in all the wrong reasons, like I'm showing you in the book of Jeremiah. They're seeking a peace where there is no peace, instead of looking to Yahweh as their peace, right? And yet the only way true peace will come is from these people surrendering to Yahweh, surrendering to His Word, and allowing Him to do it. Just like the parting of the Red Sea. Stand back and see the salvation of Yahweh, and you be still. But as a person who has been blessed to be there for almost 20 years now, doing ministry there, seeing things that in my life I wouldn't have imagined. You know, I come here to encourage you as your brother, and to say, if Yahweh opens the opportunity, take it. Come there, see your land. You know, it will change your life like never before. You see the Bible in a way that you've never seen it before. And again, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you'll never read the Bible the same way again. You know, to be at the Sea of Galilee where Yeshua walked on, to go into the mountains where Elijah fought the priests of Baal, to go to all these places. It's amazing because as you're reading the Bible, you get the spiritual side of it, but you don't know what it's like because you've never been there. But once you're there, all these little things come together, and the world becomes a smaller place, but the Bible becomes smaller also. So what a blessing it is to live in these times. And we have some tough times ahead. Like we say, we have war, we have things coming, but at the same rate, Yahweh's restoration is going to go on. It's going to go on with us, it's going to go on with Israel, and it's going to go on to the day Yeshua returns. So what a blessed time, and what blessing it is for us to be called out of the world and to be able to understand this. So Yahweh bless. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.